My name is Alana Nafziger. I'm the incoming graduate speaker series coordinator. And I'd like to give you all a heartfelt welcome to the first speaker series of 2024. The theme this semester is synthesis, which is an exploration of how we weave together ideas, disciplines, and context to create unified systems. We would like to acknowledge that as a land-grant institution, Utah State University campuses and centers reside and operate on the territories of the 8 tribes of Utah. We acknowledge these lands carry the stories of these nations and their struggles for survival and identity. We affirm Indigenous self-governance history, experiences, and the resiliency of the Native peoples who are still here today. The Logan campus is situated in the Sahivagoy or Willow Valley, the ancestral lands of the northwestern band of the Shoshone Nation, where Shoshone people have stewarded the land since time immemorial and continue to live today. So we're going to first hear from our Charrette panel, and then after that we'll have a brief Q&A. We'll have an online platform where you can submit your questions for that. And then it will be followed by a social in the common studio upstairs if you'd like to join us for refreshments. If you need credit for being here, the Slido will open after the Q&A. You can enter the code, clear and deep, at that time. Then your name, your A number, and each course number, all separated by commas. There's an example here. If you need help other than that, we're happy to do that. With that, I'm going to hand it over to our esteemed faculty member, Todd Johnson, to introduce our moderator.
Thanks, Alana. My name is Todd Johnson. I'm Associate Professor of Practice. And I spent a couple of years in the Boston area, and there was a word that got thrown around in sort of popular like sports stuff, and it was wicked, the word wicked. Wicked good, wicked this, wicked that. Then planners and designers grabbed onto wicked, and it was used in association with a concept called wicked problem solving. Wicked problem solving is best addressed by a kind of chaotic method called the Charrette process. The reason for these esteemed thought leaders is to come together and to get our entire department thinking about all the issues that are related to Bear Lake Valley. So a little bit of context. One of the benefits of a land-grant college is the opportunity and obligation to engage communities in communities and states and adjoining states addressing issues of major concern. In support of land-grant mission at Utah State, the university created the Institute for Land, Water, and Air, called ILWA, for the specific investigation of how these existential elements, land, water, and air, provide all forms of life the opportunities to survive and prosper. Beginning last year, ILWA had engaged our department with some opportunities with our senior class in Capstone Studio, which Jake Powell and I are co-teaching with Corey Shoup, a practitioner from Salt Lake City, engaged us to focus on study areas. Last year we did Great Salt Lake Basin, and this year we've been asked to go up to the Bear Lake Valley. So this past fall, a group of graduate students that I had the pleasure to teach spent the semester engaging the communities of Bear Lake Valley and investigating the issues of land, water, and air to provide the seniors with information to focus on the most important issues. Now we have additional thought leaders laying their ideas in. Today, ILWA is moderating a panel of thought leaders from various jurisdictions and from our university to discuss the perceptions and challenges of Bear Lake Valley. On Monday, this entire department, 200 faculty and students, will divide into 13 teams to spend the week taking the effort further and helping our seniors to identify 8 projects that they will then carry out between Monday and April 19th is the final presentation of the work and the delivery of a product to ILWA. So next Friday at 10 o'clock, I know there's lots of dates here. We do have a website and these things are published. Next Friday at 10 a.m., the 13 teams will present their findings, and come Monday, those 8 teams will then begin working to the end of the semester. This effort will culminate on April 19th with a final presentation for the work of the 8 capstone teams. Today, Anna McEntire, who's Associate Director of ILWA, will moderate a panel of distinguished thought leaders. She has a 20-year history of research communications here at Utah State. She helped put together and organize a thing called Research Landscapes, which is actually the forerunner to ILWA. So she's a wheel, as they say in the industry. So without further ado, Anna.
Hey everyone, thank you for letting me be here today. One thing about the Institute, the Janet Quinney Lawson Institute for Land, Water, and Air that you may not know is it doesn't sit within any single college or department, because the role of land, water, and air and environmental issues are things that we all need to care about and we all can address from whatever department or whatever discipline that we are a part of. This Bear Lake project, which has been, that we've really been grateful to do in partnership with Forestry, Fire, and State Lands, we've been really appreciative of the fact that they are supportive of the idea that it takes photographers and historians and hydrologists and limnologists and all types, including environmental planners, to be able to address the health and preservation and management of the state's sovereign lands, which includes Bear Lake. So we appreciate all of you being here. Just by raise of hands, can I see who all is going to be involved in Charrette next week? Just so you're aware, they're all gearing up for a pretty intense week of activities. And I'm so excited to see what you all come up with as aspiring environmental planners. I think it's going to be great. What we're going to do, I'm going to start by introducing the panel. We've got 6 chairs here and 5 of them are filled. I think all of our panelists' names are going to be up here. We are sorry that Mike Lenhart, who is with Garden City, couldn't be with us here today, just so you're aware of who's here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to be done with the microphone after this, and I'm just going to yell afterwards. So you can all share the microphone, because we are only mic'd for one audible mic in this room. And so where I'd like to start is, your names are up here, but I'd love you to introduce yourself, talk a little bit about your connection to the lake, as well as share one thing that you know about the lake or the valley that matters to you that you don't think is getting talked about enough. And so we'll start with that, and then I have a few questions, some of which you've read in the run of show, a few of which I might just throw in there because I've been thinking about it a lot today, and I'll make sure that I leave plenty of time for audience questions. And I believe there's a slide that's going to come up that has a QR code where you can submit those on Menti, and then they'll show up on the computer over here. All right, so we'll start with you, Patrick.
Thank you. I am Patrick Belmont. I'm the head of the Department of Watershed Sciences here at Utah State. I'm a hydrologist and geomorphologist, so I think a lot about landscape evolution over geologic timescales, but always with an eye towards what does it mean for humans, how humans interact within landscapes, and how that sets up some of the risks and liabilities and natural hazards that we have to manage. My first connection to the lake is when I was driving my moving truck here back in November of 2009. And that's the way that I took from Minnesota to get here. And I just thought, what place have I moved to? This is incredible. What a gem. I started working on Bear Lake back in 2013, maybe? 2012 or 13. As soon as I met Claudia, as you'll hear if you don't already know Claudia, she gets people to work hard on Bear Lake. And I started looking at some of the sediment issues and where sediment's coming from and where it's going within the lake, some of the impacts on the ecosystem. One issue that I don't think is talked about often enough is in the long-term planning, climate and climate's impact on Bear Lake and how that interacts with all of the other things that we're thinking about economically, socially, as well as in terms of water quality, the ecosystem surrounding it. We're on a trajectory right now that things just get more difficult from here, and we can turn that around. We know exactly what we need to do to turn that around, and we have all the technology we need to do it. But I think that should be the part of every one of these conversations we're having. The Great Salt Lake, Bear Lake, Utah Lake, all these amazing rivers and natural places that we have in this great state. So we'll keep that in mind.
Hi, everyone. We're excited you're doing this work. Get new ideas, because there's probably very little I've let go that hasn't been talked about, right? That's my job. I talk about Bear Lake. But I have worked with a nonprofit organization. It's Bear Lake Watch. It's just people from the lake, and whether it's they're full-time or part-time or come to visit, or a Bear Lake Shake that we call. People will just come over to get their shake and see the lake. So, but have learned a lot about that whole that system and the interconnectivity and all of those things that, and all the government that we have and the science that we have. And I think the thing that I want to say, maybe I'm not saying it doesn't get talked about, but I want to say it louder, maybe, is that we have to look at the lake as a whole functioning entity. And as we so often do in trying to take care of something, we divide it up and we look at the land and we look at the water separately, and there's fish in there, and what do they need, and the waves, and that's my biggest thing. The wind, the water, and the waves formed the lake in the first place. And as my good friend Patrick's taught me, you're always going to wake up on the wrong side of physics if you don't pay attention. And so that's something that we need to be pulling into the way we look at it. The lake is used as a reservoir for irrigation for our downstream users, and that's important. We're going to keep doing that. It's a promise we made 100 years ago. And so how do we keep going forward and looking at the lake, although we use it for the irrigation? Just a little wrench in the works there. So we just keep going that way. So did that cover it? Did I do my job?
Excellent, excellent. I'm Brandon Willis. My connection to Bear Lake, my family has a sheep ranch over there, and they have for a few generations. So I live in Laketown, for those of you that know the area quite well. That's the south end of the lake. Surrounding communities, you have little Meadowville, Round Valley. There used to be more communities than they are now. Used to be bigger, I should say. Then you go Garden City in the middle, and then you go to Idaho, Fish Haven, and Paris, Montpelier. So the fact that people might not know, actually, that I just learned the other day is there's about 100 families in the south end of Bear Lake in the 1800s. There's like 120 now. We look, if you look at the landscape, you see all the houses, you assume the area has grown. That's actually not true. I mean, yes, to some small extent. But what you have in a town like Laketown is at least a third, maybe a little bit more of the houses are actually empty. So we have some real housing issues, actually. There's no place for people who want to work there to live in some cases. And so you're seeing them move out of the valley over to Randolph, which if you've ever been to Randolph, you know that's unfortunate because they're wonderful people, but that climate is horrible.
Thank you. So my name is Ben Stireman. I'm the Deputy Director at the Division of Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. And I want to say thank you for having me. I think it's a privilege to be here, and I think the work that you all do at with these charrettes is wicked good. Now, did I say that right, Todd? Cool. Good, wicked good. So the thing that I think I would want to say about Bear Lake is that this is your land. So, and when I say that, I mean that Bear Lake is a sovereign land body. It means that it's the people. So we manage this land at Forestry, Fire, and State Lands. We manage Bear Lake, Bear River, Great Salt Lake, Jordan River, Utah Lake and portions of Green and Colorado rivers. But much like the air we breathe, they don't belong to one person or one entity. It's yours. So I really appreciate the work you're all doing, and I think it's going to be invaluable in shaping how we manage Bear Lake for you guys into the future. So thank you for having me.
I have so many crazy thoughts when I hear them talking about ownership and stewardship, and I'm thinking my people have stewarded that place for thousands of years without screwing it up. And now we're here to talk about what we can do to mitigate the problem. So I'm Darren Parry. I live in Avon. I live in the beautiful Cache Valley, Sehivagoi. I teach full-time at the University of Utah. I teach environmental humanities, mostly indigenous perspective to climate and environment, to graduate students. And but I spend most of my time up here. I'm an Aggie at heart. So one thing I think about all the time when I go up there, and I just got a ticket in Garden City, by the way. Me and Will Munger last weekend, so I'm still pissed about that. What are we going to do to make it more sustainable? Because the current pace, it's not sustainable. So what are we going to do? And whose voices are we going to finally listen to, maybe? Whose voices have been absent for a long time? And so I'm just honored to be able to be here. And Todd, we ought to have the same, first place team ought to get the same reward they got last year. Don't you? Yeah, I'll do something. First place team last year got a Shoshone dinner cooked for them. And Todd can cook, so. But let's go. Let's get this thing started. I've got lots to say.
Can everyone hear me if I don't talk with the mic? Thumbs up if you can. Okay, I want to ask 2 more questions of you in the audience. The first one is, raise your hand if you've been to Bear Lake. Good. Excellent. I got the chance in November to take a group of those who were doing research on Bear Lake up to Bear Lake. Rocky Mountain Power took us on a tour of some of their infrastructure that they have up on the north end of the lake. And I found out several of our graduate students who had come from out of the country had not yet been to Bear Lake. So I said, okay, we're going to stop at the overlook so you can see the grandeur before we head down into the valley. And we got there and it was November and the whole place was fogged in. So we got up there and it's just clouds. Luckily, by the end of the day, at about 3 p.m., we were coming back and leaving, and the fog had burned off. And it was such a great experience to watch someone see the lake for the first time. And that's something that I hadn't really experienced because I've been going to the lake since I was, since before I could remember. And that was something that reminded me like how to, what the importance of the lake is. I want to ask a second question. Who has read or heard a news story on Great Salt Lake? Okay, now who has read or heard a news story on Bear Lake? A little bit less. I would like whoever wants to answer this question to sell me on the importance of addressing Bear Lake. What are the challenges that this group should be thinking about, working on, addressing that matter in a way that we'd want to read about in the news or see the attention paid to it in the same way that maybe we see on other lakes on the Bear River system?
All right, I'll take a crack. I think that from our agency's perspective, one of the biggest challenges that we face in trying to manage Bear Lake effectively and being good stewards of Bear Lake is dealing with fluctuating water levels. There's a lot of impacts that occur from that. So when the lake is down, there's more room and places that invasive species can come in, and when that natural hydrology of the lake is broken, that causes impacts. And so I think that that's a big challenge. It also creates recreational challenges for things that may be undesirable on those lands. And so I think that would be a really good thing for y'all to focus on and come up with some ideas on how to best manage that. And I would love to read about it if you have any answers.
Sure. I can go next. I guess one thing I'd like to seed I'd like to plant is the Humpty Dumpty problem. Does that reference ring a bell with folks? How many people who know who Humpty Dumpty was? They still talk about that? Humpty Dumpty fell off the wall, and I don't even know how it goes, but they couldn't put him back together is the point. And that's the way a lot of ecology works. Once we break it, often it's not possible to put it back together the way that it was. And so, Bear Lake is still not a pristine system, but it's a system that is in great shape still. We look at other systems around the state like Utah Lake. Utah Lake has been hammered for decades with excessive nutrients coming from wastewater treatment plants and things like that. And it's going to be incredibly expensive to fix. All these invasive carp that have been introduced there. Bear Lake is still in really good shape. And I want to make sure that we're not underestimating the challenges if we break pieces of it. And it's a whole ecosystem, like Claudia said. All these pieces are linked. But I think we often will dive in figuring that we can have technical solutions to any of the problems that come up. If we start excessive nutrient loading, well, we'll pull those out some way. Or if an invasive carp gets in there, we'll figure that out. We've seen that not work out in a lot of other places. And so this is a really special place that I'd love for us to be thinking about how to keep that ecosystem as whole and as healthy as we can up front. And that doesn't mean not developing any of it. That doesn't mean not moving forward with some of the improved recreational opportunities and things like that people have, but doing it in a really deliberate and meaningful way that's erring on the side of, like Darren said, I think not screwing it up any more than it already is. So that's my piece.
Interesting thinking about reading about Bear Lake in the press. As the Great Salt Lake went into crisis, every time there was a story about Bear Lake, it was, and will that injure the Great Salt Lake? And so I'd love to see Bear Lake just be able to get that press and really stand on its own. And I think part of that is we hear so much about what's going on in the Great Salt Lake. Actually, I don't want to diss Great Salt Lake, but the crisis in the Great Salt Lake is going to be what saves Bear Lake and Utah Lake, because the state's finally realizing we have to deal with these as lakes, and we better be ahead of the game. So kind of going back to that piece. I've been so busy, I haven't written very many articles. So if you haven't been reading about it, it's probably just my fault because I haven't. I haven't been getting out there and getting that done. So, but for people to be educated about Bear Lake, and that's one of the things that we want to really tackle. It's to build I want to build a whole curriculum on Bear Lake for everyone to start to learn from just basic 101 where it is and things about it and really delve into it. And we're excited about the new science that's coming out. And all of those things are going to help build that story. And hopefully we can get some press time.
Okay. In the past year that we realized that were you going to answer it? Okay. I'm going to go on to the next one. There are two things that I have learned in the past year, and I thought I knew a lot of things about Bear Lake, but then I read Forestry, Fire, and State Lands Comprehensive Management Plan, which I'm sure will be passed around in your charrette next week. But one thing I sensed and one thing I didn't. The one that I was really unaware of is that Bear Lake is a natural lake, and it's also a reservoir. So it's part of the Bear River system, but only artificially. So if you go up and you recreate up at North Beach, right there you see a canal that goes into the north of the lake, and then one that comes out, and that the Bear Lake Valley or the Bear River system uses that to store water from the Bear River so that they can release it for irrigation throughout the year. And that creates some things that are not natural about the lake levels. So that was one thing that I had no idea about. But then we went up and we walked around all of those pumping stations and their dams, and it's a really interesting system that they've developed up there. The second thing, which I sensed because I've been going there since I was a little kid, is that over the past 10 years, visitation to Bear Lake Valley has increased by 300%. And if I'm not mistaken, the 10 years before that, visitation had increased by 300%. And so I realize that when you go and you try and get an RV spot up at Bear Lake, you have to be 6 months in advance to get a spot that you want. And so those are two things that potentially cause challenges and problems that may need to be managed around by planners and as we think about what the future of the lake is. Does anyone want to talk about how either one of those things affects the way we think about the future?
I hog the mic, sorry. They kind of roll together, but as the lake goes up and down, and if you look at the hydrograph, we've had years where, in the 80s it was up all the time, things were great and healthy, and then there were kind of ups and downs, and then in these recent years, and this goes back to what Patrick's talking about, we have seen this great change, which was probably due to the climate change, so that goes up and down drastically. We go down it can go down 20 feet via the pump. So, and then we've had 2011 and 2017 where it came up 12 feet in a year. And that's like this huge swing. And that's a hard thing for people that live around there and for the guests also who plan to come to deal with. So those two do cross over, and that when you get to those people that are coming, I don't know where they all come from, because there must be nobody on the Wasatch Front on the weekend because they're there. So we're happy that people come and love Bear Lake. And I think one of the things that we need to do, and hopefully you guys have some ideas of how do we teach people to take care of that lake and that lake bed, and how we learn to play together. And then I think the other thing might be either it's a gate at the top, when we're full, we don't let more in, or get a reservation. It's a real problem. Where is everybody going to go, and where are they going to play when they get there, and how are they going to behave? And those are big challenges that we're seeing. And I'm going to hand this to Bran to talk about this, and then for them to realize when they get there, they actually are in somebody's home.
I'm going to say a lot, but I'm going to pass on this one.
Okay. Okay, I will just maybe respond to the recreation aspect of that. As I mentioned before, the fluctuating water levels and then just the amount of visitation that we've seen, as Anna described, it's continually increasing. And I think over the term of COVID, we really felt that. Everybody wanted to be outside. Everybody wanted to be at Bear Lake or somewhere else and be outside with people again. And so that didn't. I kind of expected things to slow down, and it didn't. If anything, I think things are just that trajectory. People got a taste of, what it's like to be outside, what it's like to swim, kayak, whatever it is that you like to do on Bear Lake. But we really felt that, and so we're trying to be proactive in trying to plan out these systems. Our division has asked for funding to do things like human waste management. Like, we need more toilets. We can't rely on porta potties anymore. It's as things continue to increase, it's just not going to work. We've really pushed with UDOT to try to figure out the traffic problem there on the southern side of the lake there, and I think that there's probably another dozen and a half issues that we need to be addressing to be proactive. But with that, we're also looking at increased law enforcement presence to make sure that the lake's not being, degraded from activities that are illegal or not allowed on sovereign lands. So as we're welcoming people to Bear Lake, I think it's just, how do we do that in a way that's going to be sustainable?
Maybe just add a small point with regard to the plumbing at the north end of the lake. Bear Lake is this beautiful, clear, deep, and blue water body. And it's had a relationship with the Bear River that has been on and off. The Bear River sometimes has been connected and sometimes not. And we have decided that it's going to continue to be connected every single year. And we've increased the efficiency of that connection. And by that I mean, it used to really go through this big swamp at the north end of the lake that would clean out a lot of the sediment and nutrients before it gets into the lake. And in the name of efficiency, which is the way we design a lot of things, we've made sure that that water is coming pretty directly into the lake. And the downside of that is you're getting a lot more sediment and nutrients in there. And so it's just another one of these fundamental tenets that I think needs to be challenged a bit, that we can't keep designing things just for efficiency and optimization of management, but some level of inefficiency is a really good thing. Putting water back through Dingle Marsh and Mud Lake and letting some of that settle out so that we're preserving the water quality in Bear Lake could be a really good thing. So in your design practices, maybe consider a little inefficiency.
I keep craning my neck over. I know that there's a lot of great questions that are coming in from you, and I'm going to move to those really quickly. I want to ask 2 more questions for whoever wants to answer them. The first one is, a number of these students will be our environmental planners of tomorrow, and I think that's just such a fascinating and important profession where it's so much of their responsibility is to balance the human comfort and prosperity and quality of life with environmental health, conservation, preservation, as they are thinking about how to do that balancing act. What values do you think that they should have as their true north for making recommendations, making plans, making decisions?
That's ready.
2 semesters ago, I was asked to teach a workshop at the University of Utah on any indigenous subject I wanted. So I gave a workshop on indigenizing the academy. And then I talked about how the academy, where you're at today, is set up to perpetuate capitalism. And I had the dean of the business school come, and I told him, I said, it's not sustainable, the path that we're on, the system that we're using today, short-term profits at the expense of everything else. I said, we can't continue down this path. We need a hybrid model. And he said to me, what would that hybrid model look like? And I said this, let's start injecting values into the decisions that we make. Just because there is a piece of property over there that we can extract, deplete, destroy, or develop, maybe we ought to start asking ourselves, should we? And at what cost will it come to future generations if we do? We don't measure, the only thing we measure in our economy and our GDP is profit. Well, that takes into account locks for our prisons. I mean, it takes into account everything that doesn't matter. We don't put a cost on pollution, what we're doing to pollute waterways. We don't affix a cost to that. Is there a cost? Yeah, there's a cost. We don't fix a cost to poor air quality. There's no cost associated at all. All we look at is, can we make $1 really quickly, and then it's out of our mind. The Iroquois had it perfect. They didn't make any decisions without considering what effect that decision would have on 7 generations ahead. Now, I'm not advocating for that. But I'll tell you, we got to start thinking about, just because we can, should we? And at what cost is it going to come to future generations if we do? Do you know the Colorado River Compact was signed 100 years ago, just over that. 7 delegates from 7 different states met at Bishop's Lodge, New Mexico, hammered out how they were going to allocate the water of the Colorado. At the end of the week, they were chaired by some guy named Hoover. At the end of the week, they all left, went home feeling good about giving twice as much water than was actually even in the Colorado. And we ought to ask ourselves a question. Do you know who wasn't there? The 30 federally recognized Indian tribes that had called the Colorado River Basin home for thousands of years, who stewarded the waterways. We ought to start thinking about, what if they had been there? What if the tribes would have been invited to have a seat at the table 100 years ago? What if they would have started injecting values into the decisions that we make 100 years ago? Do you think we'd be in the extreme crisis we're in today? I'll let you answer that. But think about that, and that should be your guiding light. Just because we can, it doesn't always mean we should. And look, I've lived a long life. I've survived cancer, open heart surgery. If I died tomorrow, I've lived a damn good life. I'm worried about you and my grandkids' future. That's what I'm worried about. And we got to start thinking in those terms. If we do this, what's it going to do to later generations? We can keep developing the Bear Lake Valley. We can. But should we? I'm not anti-development, and I think we should, but let's start asking, what's it going to cost us in the future if we do? And then make decisions like that going forward.
So I'm just not going to take away from what anybody says, because you guys are all talking about things where you are more of an expert than I am. So I'm going to focus on one thing, recognizing you guys are doing a good job on the others. I would hope they would focus on making it livable for the locals. The dollar is going to take care of the tourists. The things that need to happen for tourism to succeed over there is going to happen because of dollars. But we look at the locals, we need full-time jobs over there. We don't need more. I mean, don't get me wrong. We need more maybe, but we need to focus not on as much on the recreation jobs. And I do not want to detract at all from how valuable they are. But I'm simply saying we need full-time jobs for people who are not involved in the recreation economy. We need housing that middle-class people can afford, so they don't have to live in other parts of the county. Most of you go to Bear Lake in the summer. There's a reason for that. It's not the most enjoyable place to be in the winter, unless you don't like people and you like cold weather. I mean, if you like snowmobiles and have no friends, man, that's your place in the winter. But for those of us that hate cold weather and like people, it has challenges. And I think that's one thing we need to make an enjoyable place to live for people who want to be full-time residents living there. And so housing, jobs, open space. I really liked what Darren Parry said. Right now, sometimes, the biggest factors into what lands gets developed right now is, when does somebody die and their heirs don't want the land, and when does somebody get divorced, so it's sold. That's not how you really want to see an area developed.
Amen. I live there. I appreciate that. I was trying to tee you up on that one before, because it is somebody's home. It's a place. I had visions of moved in there, been going there for over 20 years, pretty much full time, but actually invested my life savings there, built a home, wanted to be there, couldn't wait to have more neighbors come in. I live in Fish Haven. We're not an incorporated town, and just excited to save that village that David's my husband's parents and grandparents lived and helped that grow, and now I'm seeing this same problem. There's no place for people to live. I'm never going to have neighbors because every house is a rental, and I'm going to have my neighbors, but they're going to be 1,000 different neighbors every week. And so how do we go back and plan and try to preserve our home and our community? So we're not just a playground, you know. It's a place where people live, and we want them to come live it and love it. So big challenge with this short-term rental of really changing our landscape. So that's a for us is trying to get people who will love Bear Lake and take care of it. These people are over there a week. How do I get hold of them? How do I get them to come and be part of our family and to treat our home nicely? It's not just a playground. So I knew he'd get to that. I couldn't wait to it.
I'll just add a little bit more on here. I think 7 generations is hard to plan for. And we're talking 150 or so years there. But I think it's Terry Tempest Williams that said, the eyes of the future are looking back at us and praying for us to see beyond our own time. And to be looking, the things that we do in Bear Lake over the next 10 years will have a footprint for 100 plus years probably, if not longer. And so taking that type of perspective in how we design and build it from here, I think is really important. It's also a place that, I feel like there are a lot of places in nature, and especially in Utah, that's one of the reasons I live here, that can be transformative for people. When we get all caught up in the very busy lives that we create, you get out in nature a little bit, and it regrounds and resets us. And Bear Lake is one of those places where you can have that regrounding experience. So how do we keep it accessible to a wide range of people to have those types of experiences? And I'm not just talking about wakeboarding, but lots of natural experiences, and make sure that people can do that without completely overwhelming it, and we're all sitting in traffic for 3 hours coming and going from Garden City. So
I have to stand back here now so I can see the questions. I'm going to save my last question for the end, but I'm sorry for having to crane your neck. We have so many good questions here. We'll probably be able to get to 3 or 4 of them. I'm going to try and focus on, I'm trying to group these in my head. And I think what I'm seeing here is a number of questions on growth, a number of questions on recreation, a little bit on economy, and a little bit on ecology, as well as indigenous voices. Those are kind of the things that I'm seeing here. I am going to start with recreation. So maybe I'll hit this over to you, Ben or Brandon. I've got a few questions. One is there a potential for a new state park at Bear Lake, or what other types of things might be done to help accommodate more recreation at the lake?
That's a great question. I think there's certainly potential for a new state park. I don't know that there's anything on the table that I'm aware of specifically, but I think that if that was the desire of the folks that recreate there, I think that's certainly something that we could consider, in the areas that have been zoned that way for Bear Lake. And you can, as you dive into the comprehensive management plan, there's areas that are delegated for those kind of uses, recreation or the development of those recreational facilities. And then there's other areas that we've designated as, to preserve and make sure that they don't get developed. So I think that there's certainly that possibility, but those things cost a lot of money. And I think we would also need a lot of support from the public to do that.
I mean, he seems like the guy to answer that one.
I've got another one for Brandon/Claudia, potentially. Brandon, are you pro-growth? That's what it said. What is the general view of the balance between wanting to have a year-round economy and being able to accommodate growth? Do you see any options for being able to create a more vibrant, full-time community in the valley?
Yeah, where I live, so for those of you that kind of don't understand the area, at least the politics of the area, you have Garden City, which, you drive down the canyon and, gosh, it's just exploding, right? Then you go to Laketown, and it's not the same way. Some people call Laketown anti-growth, and I don't know if that's a fair statement to say, but the communities are very, very different. And so I think even in Laketown, you're going to see people with very different opinions. Some of those that are maybe been there longest might They might even say themselves they're anti-growth. Some of us, like myself, I don't know if I would call myself pro-growth, but what concerns me, and we all look through the lens that we have, right? My lens is I have young kids, and I see shrinking elementary in Laketown. We don't have that many kids anymore. We used to have far more when I was there. I graduated in '94. And so I don't know that I'm pro-growth as much as I want to fill those houses that we have with people that actually live there, not just with people who come up for the summer. Ironically, Laketown does not allow overnight rentals, and it hurts us economically, but it helps us in other ways. So, Claudia, I'm gonna pass it to you now.
Pro-growth, I think we all know. I want my kids to be able to come live in Bear Lake if they ever, get out of law school, medical school, or something, so they can afford it. But that's a sad state of affairs, is what that is. And so, I'm not sure this short-term rental has put a business aspect to compete against residents and residential aspect. And if there's any way that we can figure out how to balance that and provide a place where real people can come and live, I think that is our greatest challenge right now. Because it's a great place. It's a great place to live. Maybe in the winter. Okay, we get snowed in occasionally, but we want it to be real. I used to think that about Park City. Who's going to live there? I started going there when it was, still had mining stuff on the street. So, it happens and people will go. So, not being anti-growth, but we need to manage growth. We looked at this back in 2008. We did a Envision Utah and had people come out and say what they wanted. And interesting, they give you these little chips where you're supposed to put them where you think all of these people are going to come. Where would you put them? And, of course, everybody put them in somebody else's community. So they all ended up in Garden City. So it's difficult. We don't have that much buildable land. We're surrounded by Forest Service and BLM, very steep slopes beyond what we've already have designated for building. Almost every piece of ground is platted into some kind of subdivision already. And then we just have personal property rights that we respect. And so I think this just came on people on our communities so fast, and we didn't respond to that blueprint when we should have. And I think that needs to be a wake-up call to us, is we really have to respond to that. We have to get the planning, zoning, and ordinances together that will help us grow in smart growth or reasonable growth, and be able to establish something more than condominiums and rental houses in our community.
Just a quick plug if you are interested in this topic of economic growth and sustainability. I mean, we're seeing the friction between those in so many ways, at so many scales, in so many places. I'm one of the conveners of a symposium, February 2nd, 9th, and 16th, called Dialogues on Economic Growth and Sustainability. And Darren will be one of our keynote speakers for that. Brian Steed is going to be one of the keynote speakers, David Zook. But we're going to have some really hard conversations with people who have very different perspectives on those topics. And so there's a couple flyers right by the door going out that you can scan a QR code. It's free to register. It's right here in the Performance Hall, February 2nd, 9th, and 16th. And we'll be revisiting a lot of these same topics from the local to the global scale.
I just wanted to say, too, I think one of the important aspects of the research and what you'll be doing with that gap analysis is, how that development looks. And I think there was a pretty, I guess, keyed-in aspect of, ecotourism and how we balance those things. And I do think there is a balance between, economic development and the environment, but it's a matter of striking that balance. And I as I left the microphone on the whole planning question, I think finding true north like Anna referred to, is really tough. But I think when you start to weigh in all of the, the impacts and unintended consequences and what the vision looks like, you can get closer to true north. And I think we just need to be able to adapt and keep learning. So anyway, there is a good balance there. Can I see it? Please.
What I'm hearing is we're trying to maintain the status quo, fix the problem, but maintain the quality of life that we've had. How can we keep doing what we do and making money off rentals and everything else, but still fix the problem? Maybe we can't fix the problem. I mean, think outside the box and think about doing it differently. Because the problem's the problem, and we know how to fix the problem. We have answers to climate change. We have all of the science has been done. In fact, I did an article and I said we've scienced the problem to death. And now we're asking science to bail us out. I mean, think about that. Maybe we ought to start looking at the problem a little differently. Crazy Horse had a dream right before he died. And he could see our day and time. And he talked about in this dream, and I'll just paraphrase, but he talked about a sick world. And he said, in those days, there will be those among my people who will possess this wisdom and knowledge to solve the problem. And then he said, the young white ones will come to those of my people searching for this wisdom. If you don't know where to find the wisdom, maybe start looking at the problem differently.
I would love to build on that with one of our student questions that is on here. 2 more questions left for this panel, and then we'll break for refreshments. This is directed towards Patrick, but I actually think that it could apply to anyone here. Patrick, you said we've got the tools. We know what we need to do to respond to climate change and other pressures on Bear Lake and other environmental challenges that we're dealing with. What are the tools? What are the resources that we should bring to bear when it comes to Bear Lake? Pun not intended.
So that's specific to Bear Lake? I mean,
Yes, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah. So the problems that we're looking at Bear Lake are excessive amounts of nutrients and sediment being introduced to the lake. There are problems of development around the lake, disrupting a lot of the natural wildlife and habitat there. This science was all done in the 70s. We have a lot of the solutions that we need to know what's going to be problematic. So in a sense, just like Darren was just saying, we have scienced this to death, and we shouldn't be moving forward in a way that is contrary to what the science has been telling us and then expect science to bail us out down the road. Looking at Bear Lake in particular, I think the technology that we need is much more understanding the social and environmental context in which we're developing and making sure that we're staying within those boundaries of sediment, nutrients, energy, things like that are pretty easy to quantify. Anybody else want to chime in there? What are the technologies we need? Maybe let me add one other then, and that's monitoring. It is helpful to also be monitoring the environment to notice when it is changing and where it is changing. And I really credit Claudia with motivating the USGS, I think maybe would be the right term, to get some real-time platforms up on the lake so that we've been monitoring in real time in multiple locations a lot of different aspects of water quality up there. And so it really helps to be able to monitor it to be proactive about solving those problems as they emerge. So.
Okay, so you all have to answer this. No one's off the hook for this one. This is the scenario that I want you to think about. Starting today, everything goes the way you think it should go on Bear Lake. Every decision that you want to be made on Bear Lake is made the way you think it should be made. Every investment that you think should be made on Bear Lake is made the way you think it should be. I don't want to know exactly what the decisions are and what your benevolent dictator role would be, but I would like you to paint a picture for me of what you see in Bear Lake and Bear Lake Valley 10 years from now in that alternate future where you had full control of everything.
When I read that question earlier today, I thought, I just want to make sure I'm not holding the mic when that question comes up. Let me just talk to one aspect of it, because I think there's a lot of great other perspectives here. But I want to make that amazing resource continue to be accessible to a lot of people. I really believe nature has the ability to transform people's perspective and to ground people. But it can't be done in the way that we're currently developing it. We're developing it in pretty low-density ways. Everybody's driving. I mean, you can spend an hour in traffic in Garden City. That's crazy. I would love to see a much more walkable and bikeable Bear Lake, like all around the lake. I think we've started to make a few moves in that direction, but that would be maybe my number one priority, be a much more walkable and bikeable place.
Well, I am the queen of... No, I'm not queen of Bear Lake.
No, I agree with that.
Sometimes I feel the pressure up. The first thing that came to my mind, because I didn't read the questions before because I've been kind of busy, but orderly. That we actually begin to look at what's capacity, what can we really handle, and how could we organize that? How can we provide places where people can go, put their feet in the sand and the water and have that real connection with nature without being run over by a side-by-side or a four-wheeler, or even have to listen to it. So I think beginning to that would be my true north, would be that we lean toward orderly and a pleasant use of Bear Lake, and that we look at capacity and providing a good experience for everybody that comes. That it's not just the chaos. That would be my sort of my true north of all my decisions that I made. And 10 years from now, it's a peaceful, quiet place, and a lot of people can enjoy it. Everybody that comes loves it, and everybody treats it with respect and cherishes that opportunity that they have. It'll be like church.
I want to say, to get to where I think we should go, you've got to have a lot more vision than we do right now. Vision from the state level, from the local level, from the business community level, from the environmental levels. I mean, we right now, in large part, decisions for the future Bear Lake Valley are made solely based on dollars and cents. And I get it. That is going to stay a major driver, but it can't be the only driver if Bear Lake's going to look like, I think, what a lot of us want it to look like. Trails were mentioned. The state's put some money in trails. The local communities, Garden City's done a great job on trails. I think they need to take that and put it on steroids. That could be a neat thing in the area, but we need way more of those for biking, for walking. And there's so much open land still out there, but somebody's got to have a vision and somebody's got to find the money to do that. I think we need to have more openness. We need to preserve large blocks of open space. Right now, it's just sprawl. It's, again, who's getting divorced, so land comes for sale. Who's dying, land comes for sale. Who needs an extra buck? Land goes for sale. We end up with these 2-acre lots that it's not good for anything. It's not good for, it's horrible for water. It's horrible for livestock. It's not open space. We need large blocks of open space. We need charm. If I lived on the East Coast for 11 years and visited some of those oceanside communities, they have charm to them. Bear Lake needs more charm. I think some things could be done with the vision there to make it a really special place. It's a great place, but I think it could be greater. And then again, I'll go back to the vibrant local community. We want everybody, great to have a strong tourism community. We need it economically. But gosh, if you just have that at the expense of a local community, that kind of sucks.
So when you asked, I kind of took that as like my dream scenario, like how I would picture Bear Lake. And so without getting into the policies and things that would get us there, I'd like to see a Bear Lake just be a resilient, sustainable system. So, a lake that can either, deal with the sedimentation nutrients, or perhaps we've fixed that problem and it doesn't need to, deal with that. But, a lake that doesn't need intervention to be, healthy, that would be where I see Bear Lake being, like, in my mind, my dream.
I'm not sure. I mean, I think back at sitting at the feet of a grandmother who told me stories about the Bear Lake Valley and how many different Indian tribes used that valley because of the resources that were there, the game and fish, and just it was a valley that many tribes used. And then at the end of the year, there was a huge party at the south end of the lake, a rendezvous, where trading took place for over a month. And so I love Patrick's idea of a biking community. I gave a lecture at the University of Copenhagen last year about sustainability, and they bike everywhere. The whole city of Copenhagen bikes. And so I know it can be done, and I love that. Maybe a little more development on the east side that takes some of the pressure off the Garden City area. We need to look at the way we plan what we're doing in the future. We need to make sure that the dollar isn't the driving force every time. And we need to start attaching dollar amounts to the degradations and the pollution and everything else we're doing. And then maybe it's not such a good idea to develop that. And maybe banks will start saying, I don't think so. Because the cost to the environment and the cost to future generations is too great. I think there's answers out there, but you guys are going to have to find them.
Thank you. We are just out of time today. I would hope that we can all thank the... Oh, go ahead.
Jake and I are sitting here clawing inside, just like I'm trying to discipline myself from just screaming out because I'm so inspired by your moderation, every viewpoint that's represented here. My radical thinking moves right to carrying capacity, getting reservations to be in the valley, extreme measures to get the complement of viewpoints that are on all these panel members' minds enacted into plans, policies, and programs. We have, from the fall class, six really good ideas. I would love to have us take the time to have them share them with you. Those ideas are not quite sharpened enough relative to the expertise of all these people and you all who are going to participate in the charrette. So my message to you is, if you want to try to accomplish the inspirational level that her last question asked, we need to all participate, and you need to come back and visit us in Charrette and visit us on April 19th and any time in between. The invitation is open. We've had strong participation already from everybody on this panel, but our invitation to you is to keep coming back and really make this charrette and LAEP a big part of ILWA's success.
We're extremely excited for that. I just wanted to thank the panel. I have an extreme amount of respect and affinity for all of you, and not just on Bear Lake projects, but the many other ways that our paths have crossed. I think I speak for the panel when I've been excited to learn from you. I hope everyone else has been excited to learn from you. I think we're excited now to learn from you and see the way that you take these ideas and come up with new and fresh out-of-the-box solutions. And I'll be there. I'll be watching. I'll be seeing what you come up with. Any final last Okay, we're going to turn the time over to Alana. She'll close us out.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you to all of our panelists for coming. We have some small gifts of appreciation for you all. So, and thanks for all of you to attending. If you want to join us in the Common Studio to continue the conversation, that would be great.